This is episode number 223 with the amazing plein air and studio artist, Mark Shasha. I think you're going to find him especially engaging and you're going to learn lots. So let's get this thing started.
This is the Plein Air Podcast with Rhoads, publisher and founder of Plein Air Magazine. In the Plein Air Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called plein air, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plein air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Rhoads.
Thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome to the Plein Air Podcast. I'm excited because I get to go painting this weekend. I have a full-time job, as you know, but very excited. Going to go up to or down to a little town called Utopia, Texas, which is where lots of Westerns were filmed, a lot of old John Wayne Westerns, beautiful, beautiful Texas scenery, rolling hills. And so I'm going to go down there and paint with some friends this weekend. So that's going to be fun. I am trying out a new easel. I am on this quest for the ultimate easel. I have not found it yet. I like them all. I buy them all. And I just bought this one, and I've already drilled into it and modified it and changed it to try to make it a little better for my purposes. And then I've got another one that I just ordered, and they're not sending these things to me for free. I'm buying them because I want to support these people. But, ultimately, I've got to find the one that I'm going to land on. I stayed on one for many, many years, but it still was just not quite what I wanted. And as I age a little bit, weight becomes an issue. So I'm trying to figure out, all those things. Anyway, I'm running out of shelf space, I should probably say. I guess I should have a garage sale for easels. Anyway, we are thrilled that this podcast is now on audio and video, and we have over 1.5 million downloads of the podcast. It's being heard in 90 countries, and it has been rated number one in Feedback's 2021 top 15 painting podcast list. Maybe by the end of this year, we'll get number one again. We'll see. Anyway, after the interview today, we're going to have the art marketing minute, and you want to hang around for that. So make sure you do that. Also, things are heating up. The Plein Air Convention is like the big family reunion. We're all very excited to be able to get together again. We have been checking, New Mexico is not having any real COVID issues anymore. We're back to normal. We don't have to social distance. We don't have to wear masks. We don't have to do any of that stuff. And we would love to have you there. We have plenty of seats because we had to cut to half size because of COVID, but then all of a sudden they released it. So we have more seats than we probably could sell, quite frankly. That's very unusual because we're usually sold out. But also we've decided that we're going to open it up to online attendance, which will be where you can see the main stage only. But that way you can see it. You're going to get Art Marketing Boot Camp. You're going to get the main stage, which has got some big, big names and a couple other things that we've got in there. So you can go to pleinairconvention.com and just look at the page about the virtual option. That'll tell you all the answers there. It's going to be spring soon. Well, it actually is spring here, but late spring and early June, mid-June, actually, I do my annual event in the Adirondacks. It's called Paint Adirondacks, and it's basically about, usually 80 to 100 friends who get together and we paint together for a week. It's a lot of fun, beautiful scenery. We have meals together. We stay in the same place together. Everybody's together, and it's a lot of fun. We sit up at night, paint portraits. We play music. It's summer camp for adults who are painters, who plein air painters, and even people who are new to plein air painting. They come and they learn about it. As a matter of fact, Charlie Hunter was an artist, but he was fairly new to plein air painting. He came up to the event. He decided that he was going to start doing all these other events, and he became famous. But it kind of started there, and so that's kind of cool. We have a lot of that kind of story happening, so we hope that you'll join us. The other thing that I'd like you, I should probably tell you the website, shouldn't I? It's paintatadirondacks.com. Also, this fall, I'm going to be taking a group of 50 people to New Zealand to paint. I did that several years ago, and it was really an amazing trip. And people said, you got to go back. And so we've refined the trip, made it even more painting and even better. And we're taking some new painting spots. And one of the things we're going to do, which is really cool, we were not able to do before, we were able to visit Milford Sound, which is like one of the seven wonders of the world. It's beautiful. But we weren't able to paint there. This time we're going to be able to paint there. We're also going to be able to paint in Glenorchy. We painted there enough time for one painting, but you're going to have an overnight, a little more time. That's going to be cool. So we've got a lot happening. Anyway, this is limited to 50 people because there's a boat involved, and we're going to be actually staying on a boat one night as we go down to Milford Sound, and there's only enough for 50 people. And so we can't expand this trip, and we already have more than half of the seats are occupied. So I think there's at this time that I'm recording this, there's 23 seats left. You can get the itinerary and all the other things at paintnewzealand.com. All right. Well, I just seem to be just kind of screwing up here today. Sorry about that. Anyway, we have a really terrific guest today. Our guest is Mark Shasha. He was born in 1961. That means he's an old guy, but he's not as old as yours truly. He's an award-winning American artist. He's an author, an educator, an actor. After college at the Rhode Island School of Design in 1983, he was a frequent illustrator for the Boston Phoenix, the Globe, and many other publications. His work led to invitations to hundreds of schools and libraries where he delighted hundreds of thousands of children with stories and songs and drawings, and he continues to delight us. He has recently released a video with Streamline Paint Tube called Shimmering Light, and it is doing very well. It's selling well, and it's very informative. So, Mark, welcome to the Plein Air Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric. It's good to see you again.
Do you get a big head when people read your bio?
Never. Thank you for the that grudging introduction, as they say.
Yeah, well, you're not a big head kind of guy. You're one of those people who's really a super nice guy. You're fun to hang out with, and pretty modest, I'd say.
Well, thank you for that. I do. I'm always looking for what I can do next, or usually the conversations I have with other artists and painters is, what do I need to do next to move into a new thing? So it tends to humble me a little bit.
Well, let's talk about that, because it's a really great transition. There are artists that we all know who kind of stay in the same place for their whole career. And then there are artists like yourself and others who are really trying to always push themselves to the next level. What's the thinking and the feeling behind that?
Oh, what a great question. I just feel driven somehow to express myself in various ways. And I find, and it may sound a little corny, but I think I fall in love with things. And I want to express them on canvas. For example, for a period of years, I just wanted to write and illustrate children's books. I wanted to tell stories. And I loved bringing people along with my books. And that was so important to me. And then at some point, I realized that it required that I collaborate with a lot of other people. And editors had their point of view, and art directors had their thoughts. And I just thought, well, okay, I may have done enough with children's books for now. I want to pursue paintings of the ocean or paintings of the landscape. And that is the next thing that caught me. And I just fell in love with that. And then during the COVID period, I there, during a lot of those lockdowns, I would feel like this is a great opportunity to finally do some painting that I haven't done enough of, like maybe do a little more figurative work or get back into sort of cityscapes. And as I was looking at the shoulds, I started feeling more like, you know what, no, there's things I want to do, and I'm going to go for the things I want to do first. And I just wanted to paint the beach. I wanted to get back into the sand and the sort of the texture of the ocean, painting, getting that on canvas. So that's kind of what I started to get back into. And I had a great big show in Boston last year, a solo show at the Guild of Boston Artists, where I've been a member. And, if I'm rambling too much, you just stop me, Eric. But
Oh, I'll just hang up on you, Mark.
it's just, I'm a very expressive person. I think that's what keeps me humming and being interested in a lot of other things.
Well, I think we got the benefit of that too, because you and I were talking personally when you were here filming your video here in Austin, and you were talking about the pandemic and how you kind of it took you up several notches. It brought you up to a higher level, and of course, all these new things that you learned, we were able to put into that new video product too. So that's a benefit. In what other ways did you receive what I like to call the gift of COVID? You had time to paint and experiment. What other benefits did you see?
Well, I think that it gave me an opportunity to read more, catch up with some really great books that I'd wanted to read. I really am fascinated in the era in Vienna at the turn of the last century, when artists and thinkers and scientists merged together. And there's a great book, I have this over here somewhere, the Age of Insight by Eric Kandel. It was a wonderful book, got me into that. But also lots of painting. I mean, the thing about this experience we've all been through is it's great for people who are solitary, who like being on their own, and then an artist in the studio or an artist out in the field. The obligations were a lot fewer for that social stuff.
So do you have a process that you try and discipline yourself towards growth? I get this question a lot from people is, how do I get myself to the next level? You've done that several times. You've obviously, how long have you been painting?
I've been painting for 50 years easily.
Yeah. So you've done it multiple times. Do you have a process or a system that helps you, kind of push yourself to the next level?
I've never had to push myself. I've never had to. I naturally am constantly wanting to paint. It's kind of just been the joy of my life to sing and act and pick up the guitar and play it, or, try out for a play, or pick up canvas and paint. I always have my sketchbooks. I think my process is just to be open to the world and to open myself to things that I love, and to just dive right into them.
But don't you ever get to a point where you're like, I was in a museum and I saw this piece and like, I can't figure out how that artist did that. And you're trying and you're trying and you're frustrated.
Yes, exactly. That's the other part of it, which is I have this longing to study these. I may have mentioned this with you at another time, but I went into the Art Institute of Chicago because I had not been there before. This was about 15 years ago. And I went around the corner. I was just soaking in the American wing, all those American landscape paintings.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned the corner, and there was the magnificent Fountain by John Singer Sargent. I had seen it all my life, and it just filled me with such passion to see it. I wanted to know, how did he make that tree behind the woman so perfect? How did he make the water look like it was moving? How did he make that beautiful hand gesture that she has with those brushes, and it looks like you can almost see the fingernails. But when you look up close, you can see, now this was the first time I had the chance to see it in person,
I've
and I
never seen it
couldn't
in
walk
person. How
away
big is it? Is it
for
small?
about 3 hours. I tried to walk away. I kept coming up and studying it. I don't remember how big it was. uh, I'm doing 16. It's bigger than 16 by 20.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but it's just a mesmerizing experience. And of course, the passion it's like gasoline. It fuels me. Like, how did he do that? I want to learn how to do that myself.
Yeah.
And
In
that'll
that
get me
particular
going.
painting, the story behind that painting is that is Sargent's sister, who was a watercolorist, and Richard Ormond, who is the historian of Sargent, that was his grandmother.
Incredible.
So, then it would be fun to sit in on those family stories and and hear all about them. We'll have to have Richard on again sometime. So, who are your inspirations? If you go to seek out books or museums that certain painters that, we all have some of the same ones, it seems, but there are certain ones that maybe you have. Who are some of those people?
Well, I love Hopper, and I've really gotten turned on to Andrew Wyeth again. Something about Andrew Wyeth, I had read this wonderful book about him, An Artist's Life, and oh man, just I think of myself as an artist, but you read about Andrew Wyeth, and I just don't feel like a real artist compared to his intensity.
What was it? What was it that made you feel that he was a real artist?
Well, I mean, his struggle over every single painting. You read about how the agony he went through to try to get a mark right, and his anger as he was painting, and he was trying to get these lines a certain way, and he would crumple up the paper and he'd throw it and he'd toss it in the dirt and step on it and just get angry with it. And then he'd hold it up and look at it and say, yeah, that's kind of what I'm going for. I mean, he would damage his work in an effort to, just because he was the angst, and it never really stopped. He had that kind of angst about his work and trying to get it right all the time. And I think Andrew Wyeth was dismissed as just an illustrator for decades. And it's just fun to revisit him and to revisit some of his paintings. And there are other artists too. I mentioned Hopper, but Hopper, I'm a New England guy, and
Yeah.
to go to Cape Cod, Hopper was painting my life before I knew Hopper. It was like art. Of course, the word art comes from artifice. And so here we are, we're creating the truth on canvas or paper through an artificial means, right? And I would look at Hopper, and I mean, he captured the grass hit in the late afternoon sun in September in those dunes, and the light on the building behind it, and then the dunes above, beyond, perfectly composed. And it's all just paint on a canvas or paint on a piece of paper. And it's hard to believe that so much could be there in this simple imagery. And I just constantly I marvel when an artist so perfectly captures so much that is true in making something that's handmade.
Right.
It's
So,
kind of mind-blowing.
wasn't Hopper also an illustrator? Yes, no, I don't. I really don't know.
I think he was. I kind of always put it's interesting, isn't it? That line between what's an illustration versus what is fine art. And of course, we know the word fine in fine art doesn't mean it's really, really fine, or it's what nice finery. The word fine in fine art comes from the Latin word fine, which means end, an end in and of itself. And that's what makes a fine art painting. If the painting doesn't have a utilitarian purpose, it's not like a piece of pottery, which can rise to the level of fine art, but it doesn't have a purpose other than in its own, it is the end in and of itself.
Well, you know, I when I first got into the art world, there were there were people who considered illustrators to be a lower class. You know, I remember a discussion with someone about Rockwell, for instance, and this was a high-end East Coast art dealer who said, "Oh, no, no, Rockwell's an illustrator. We don't consider that fine art." But there was a transition somewhere along the line where all of a sudden it was embraced as remarkable as it is. The same thing happened with Maxfield Parrish, where Maxfield Parrish, you know, all these guys, Landecker, you know, they were illustrators. They were doing, you know, the Saturday Evening Post and other such things. But now their work is really being appreciated for how fine it really was. I mean, these people were brilliant draftspeople to start out with. But, you know, Parrish and what he went through to execute a painting was pretty remarkable. You know, he'd build models and light them, and it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it took it very, very seriously. And, you know, most of those illustrators, they came up in the golden age of illustration was before television. And so illustrators had to tell a story. That was the TV of its time.
Yeah.
You know, you had radio, but you could turn, or you go to the movies, of course. But I mean, just look at the storytelling in Norman Rockwell and what he, how many layers of information he would put into one of his paintings. And it's not just a painting, it's a story, it's an emotion, it's a multiple emotions, and people really responded to it. And now that now that TV's been around for a while, and now we have the ubiquity of videos on the internet and all that, it's interesting. What do we expect from the painted picture now? It's just an interesting thing. And it's funny you mentioned Maxfield Parrish. I was just at the St. Regis Hotel in New York at the old King Cole.
Oh, wonderful mural.
You know the bar I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
Where they got that big Maxfield Parrish thing.
Yeah, they were talking about removing it for a while.
You know, that painting, that mural is probably worth more than the real estate it's in. Which in New York City is saying something.
Yeah, it really is. So while we're talking about inspirations, anybody else coming to mind?
Oh, so many come to mind, Eric. I mean, I'm inspired by so many artists and so many things. You know, I don't want to bore your audience with long lists, but, you know, Jacques Cousteau for his, you know, people say, what, Jacques Cousteau, where the hell are you getting that? Well, yes, he was an explorer, but he was also a designer. You know, he designed scuba gear. He came up with it. He also was a great poet, a great writer, great photographer, underappreciated.
A true
And a
Renaissance.
great filmmaker.
Yeah.
So I'm inspired by people who respond to the natural world. And as far as painters go and illustrators, I mean, I still think Chris Van Allsburg, who was one of my teachers at the Rhode Island School of Design, great inspiration even now. I don't know what he's been up to lately, but I love the way he always turns the head away in a picture and invites you to look into the mysterious places. It's mind expanding that way, in the same way that Rod Serling was mind expanding with the Twilight Zone, say.
So what would you say? What would you say? Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
What would you learned from? You said it was Chris
Van Allsburg.
Yeah. So what do you think are the major takeaways? Obviously, he had a big impact on you when you were studying, but are there things that you could articulate today that still ring in, you know, you're talking to yourself while you're painting and you're thinking about some essential lessons that Chris taught you?
Well, I do think that the leaving the sense of mystery in your painting. I tend to do, I always had making your painting alluring so that it's not just a picture of a thing, but that it invites you in. And maybe that's a little bit of the illustrator in Chris Van Allsburg as well, just inviting the viewer in and and encouraging you to linger in the mystery of it all. I remember when one of my classes, I had him for a few classes, but one of the classes I was going through kind of a funk. It was, I think, my sophomore year of college, and I went in for the first class, and I did a really great job on my homework assignment, which was to draw something with, it was a pen and ink drawing. And then I skipped the second class, I skipped the third class, and I showed up for the fourth class. And he said, Mark, I want to talk to you. And he took me out into the hall. And he said, I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks. I mean, what's going on? And I said, well, I don't know. I'm going through a bunch of stuff. I'm trying to sort things out. And he said, well, look, all you have to do, Mark, is decide. Just decide if you want to take the class or not. Now, that might not sound like a very deep lesson, but I really took this to heart. And I took it to heart and applied it to other things in life. I did decide. I decided to stay in the class. I decided to give it 100%. And I did very well in that class. And, I ended up doing a children's book. I dummied up a children's book for my assignment for that class and did some other things. But it's a lesson that I learned from Chris. Just decide, make a decision.
Critical life lesson, isn't it? I mean, sometimes we all get so mired in the idea of trying to figure out, they were just back and forth, and sometimes you just got to make a decision. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
You were talking about seeing paintings in person, and I would be curious because I think you've got a good track on society and what's happening. I look at what's happening with TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat and everything else, and by the way, I think it's all marvelous. I'm not one of those guys who thinks it's the devil and the end of the world. I think it's all very wonderful and very fast moving, and I think it also is going to recraft how we have to edit things in video and so on, because everything, you can tell a story in 30 seconds now. But what's the impact on the art world? Because I feel as though I actually have heard from people, young people, who have said, I saw something online, it didn't really get me all that interested, but when I saw it in person, it completely caught my eye. And one of the things I think we're all concerned about is, during the TV age, that changed probably how people perceived and used art. The radio age was probably before that, a little bit of that. But how does all of this impact those of us who are artists, those of us who are gallery owners or museums?
Well, that's an excellent question. I think the good and bad news is we don't know yet entirely how it'll affect us. I think it's going to affect us a lot. I see it affecting my life in ways that I can pinpoint. I mean, before Instagram, I just think of all the artists I didn't know about. And all of a sudden, Instagram introduced me to hundreds and hundreds more artists, even than Facebook had introduced me to. And it has been an absolute joy to get to know these artists personally.
Some brilliant artists who probably didn't even have any success or any notoriety until Instagram.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you got hats off to Instagram for doing that. Now, TikTok is an interesting thing because it includes music and a little video and a little bit of other stuff. And we don't know yet what that's going to lead to. I think it's interesting. I've got 5 or 6 new songs in my playlist, thanks to little snippets that I heard on Reels and on TikTok that I just loved. I'm like, what is this music? I love it. So I would download the music, and then I get to know the album, the whole, and so that's happening. Mm-hmm. And I do believe, and I've talked about this before, I think that there is a flow in our culture. That's what culture is. It's the flow of artist to artist, musician to visual artist to actor to, we all have that experience. And I mentioned it maybe before, but you know, some not a mechanical designer, but somebody designed the first tubes of paint, the
Hmm.
first oil tubes. And then Monet picked that up and said, aha, a light bulb goes off. He's outside painting. And for the first time, we have Impressionism. He inspires someone who sees the brush strokes, and that's Van Gogh. Van Gogh sees Monet's brush strokes that he's got in all this light, and he gets very expressive about it and does Starry, Starry Night. You skip ahead and you have Don McLean singing Starry, Starry Night. And, you get chills when you see the connections of art, artist to musician, musician to visual artist. I remember when I read Bob Dylan said that he thought his song, All Along the Watchtower, was one of the best songs he'd ever written. And then he heard Jimi Hendrix's version of it, and it was like a whole new song.
Yeah.
And he got chills from that. So where will TikTok lead? Oh man, all I know is it's going to be good. I really do. It's going to
So
inspire people.
you were talking earlier about putting mystery into your paintings. I find that to be very challenging. I have attended marketing courses on creating mystery in advertising, where it's in some cases it's, that direct stare of the eyes, but usually it's the eyes looking off or someone looking away. But in a landscape painting, which is what you mostly are known for anyway, how do you create mystery in a landscape painting?
Well, there's a few things that jump right to mind. One is that painting that I was already talking about, the Fountain by John Singer Sargent.
Yeah.
There's so much going on in that tree. That's what I mean. The tree takes up a huge chunk of the painting, but what the heck is going on there? Looking at the undulating greens, but what's in the shadows? The shadows are the mystery. What is she thinking about? What is he thinking about? And what is the setting? There's a lot, there's like unwritten things, untold things that are suggested, but not really didactically expressed. When I was writing and illustrating children's books, I remember my editor at Simon and Schuster said to me, don't put in the artwork any information that's going to be in the text. So for example, if I'm carrying a red apron on my way to my grandmother's hot dog stand, don't write, I carried my red apron. It's in the picture. So you leave the picture to answer questions that the text does not answer. And that became part of a window into an insight for me into how much should we let our pictures tell the story, and how much should we ask of the viewer to kind of inquire on their own. But you got to grab their attention first.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the hard part.
So what makes a great painting in your opinion?
Oh man. Oh gosh, a great painting's got to grab you. All right, here's my first thoughts about this. And like the hippies say, first thought, best thought. I think the picture that pictures don't speak. They don't make any noise. They sit on a wall. You could easily walk right past them. They don't sing. They don't have any flashy things on them, and they don't make noise. So I guess a great picture is something that when you're across the room, you don't even know what it is yet, just something about the shapes coming together on the wall, far, far away, and it's got your attention, you've probably got a great painting there. And then when you get closer to it, and every time you look at it, you see something new, or something that you didn't see the last time.
Pulls you in.
Pulls you in, and I think a great painting should light up parts of your brain. It should light up parts of your imagination. It should make you want to it should make you think or make you feel things.
What was the first painting that ever did that to you?
Oh man.
Do you remember the moment?
It had to be long ago. Might not have. I think art I think art always hit me that way, regardless of whether it was a song or a painting. But to answer your question about a painting, maybe the first visual images that did that to me were the illustrations in some Walt Disney books. You
Yeah.
know, Pinocchio.
Right.
There's a scene in one of the great old Disney books. I don't know if they come out anymore, but they used to be like a collection of little versions of what were really the movies. But they were illustrated by some really terrific illustrators. And I remember a scene, this might be the earliest one that did this to me, of Pinocchio walking on the bottom of the ocean. Remember that? And he's walking on the bottom of the ocean. He's trying to get back to his dad or something. He's left the island of where all that weird stuff happened. And he's got the donkey ears or something.
Yeah.
I think that was the one, or maybe, yeah, I think that was probably, if it wasn't.
Wow, that's pretty incredible recall. I hadn't even thought about any of those for a
Oh
long time.
yeah, gosh.
Well, and you think again, you think back at the great illustrators who were doing those things, N.C. Wyeth, and I don't know who did Pinocchio, but but Treasure Island, and the swashbucklers, and
Oh yes.
I never really stopped to think about that. I remember a painting stopping me when we went to New York as a kid. Maybe I was 12, and we went into the Frick. I didn't remember it being the Frick, but I went into the Frick a few years before COVID, and I walked in and I thought, that's the first painting I really remember ever seeing. It was like a 30-foot painting of pirates that were sword fighting on the top of a ship. And it was the first time I realized art could come alive. I never really thought about the books I had seen that probably did that. And you've done a good job of articulating that. You had gone, you went through some tough stuff. When I teach art marketing at the Plein Air Convention, and I always say, my job is to eradicate the idea of the starving artist. We've romanticized Van Gogh and the hell that he went through, but I don't want any artist to have to go through the difficult times that someone like that went through with his drug addiction, his alcoholism, and his sexual addiction, and everything else that went with it. But it was, there was some value to that angst as well, right? And somebody said, well, would Van Gogh have been Van Gogh if we had invented Prozac back then?
Right.
But you were a starving artist. You were literally sleeping on the streets. Tell us about that.
Well, my sleeping on the street spell was very brief, and it was for just a few nights, but I experienced what it was like because I didn't have enough money to get on the train to go back to either my home or where my aunt was, going to put me up for a little while. I needed to stay somewhere.
What
And I
put
was in
you
the
in that
streets of
position?
Boston.
What put you in that position?
Well, when I got out of the Rhode Island School of Design, I was just broke,
Yeah.
and I didn't have money for first and last month's rent, and I didn't have a job yet, and all I had was my art resume and a portfolio. I went up to remember my aunt lived in Newton, and I went to her place, and for a few days, I couldn't stay there, but I left my stuff there. And I went into town thinking I was going to stay with some friends, and I couldn't stay at their place for other reasons. And I just had nowhere to go. And I didn't have any money for a train or even food.
Must have been
So I
terrifying.
ended up, I had 3 or 4 nights on the street, just sleeping in, under bushes and stuff. I hated it. I tried to stay awake, but when I see people who are homeless now, I'm telling you, though it was only a couple of, really less than a week, I know what it feels like, and it's horrible. But I got out of that.
So you have had the benefit of a long and prosperous career. There are people who are listening to this who may be in a similar position, or maybe they're in a job that they don't love and they really want to become artists. They want to produce, they want to make their living. If you could save them a few steps or save them some years of difficulty or angst in terms of launching their careers, what would you tell them to do?
Oh boy, that's a tough one because I don't know that there are any shortcuts. I'm sorry to say but if I could take any angst out, I would just say, be true to yourself. Be true to yourself. You've got to know yourself. You've got to know whether or not you can put up with the ups and downs. And the truth is, I had it easy in a way because I never could be employed. I was unemployable, really. I mean, I did jobs, sure. I mean, I was a waiter. I did a lot of waiting of tables because there was food there for me, and I could eat and I could smoke cigarettes, and smoking cigarettes like killed my appetite, so I didn't have to worry about eating. And I drank a lot of coffee, but I don't advise that for anyone. I just think that what you got to do is you just got to believe. I mean, without too much elaboration, I had a life-changing experience when I was 16 years old. Yeah. I was in a boating accident, and someday I could get into everything that happened there. But basically, I was in a boat. I fell out. I fell out of the boat in an attempt to save someone who had fallen out of the boat. And the two of us were now out of the boat. And I had to get back in the boat to not only save myself, but to save him. And the current was pulling me away from the boat. I don't know what happened to me. I don't know what source of energy I found. But when I got back in that damn boat, I swam back to the boat and I jumped into the boat. And my buddy, who I ended up saving, says he saw me jump out of the water like a dolphin. And I don't know how many times in my life I have had a situation where I thought, well, can I rise to this occasion? Can I really be an artist? Can I really be a lifeguard? Can I really get this? I never had another fear after that. I mean, I have not been afraid of much. I mean, I will talk to anyone. I will call anyone. I don't run around with a lot of fear of what will happen if I pursue my dreams. I just do it. And I have done that with my children's books. People said, you'll never get published. A month after they told me that, I was published by Simon & Schuster.
Does that challenge you? When somebody tells you something like that, you're like, nah, I'm going to prove them wrong.
I do. I think my whole life has been, about doing what I really want to do. And I have no fear of what people tell me. If they say, don't do it, you'll never do it. It's almost like I didn't even hear it.
Yeah.
It's just, of course I'm going to do it. Sometimes I have to negotiate with people because I can't just do what I want. I have to, if it affects other people, I have to work with them in that situation. But I followed everything I wanted to do. I have no regrets.
I want to talk about some plein air painting and some technique in a minute, but I want to ask you one other question. I remember you telling me you had kind of a pivotal year when you moved from being an illustrator to a fine artist. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I had an amazing experience. I had been writing and illustrating for children's books. And before that, I had been an illustrator for magazines, newspapers, and such. And I got to some point where I hit a wall. I was tired of trying to navigate things with the publishing world. I didn't know how to, I just didn't want to work with so many people. I'm not a good collaborator. I'm not proud of that. I'm an independent-headed guy, and I just couldn't find my way. And one day I went into, a buddy of mine had said, you got to go to a gallery in Orleans, Massachusetts, down on Cape Cod. You got to check it out. And, we artists, we're always told, people say, oh, you got to do this. You got to go there, paint this. And I put it out of my mind. But I thought, it was one rainy weekend. I was in Orleans. It was 2001 or so. And I saw the name of this gallery. It was Tree's Place. And I thought, you know what? We're here. I might as well go check it out.
Good gallery.
And it changed my life. because it opened up, finally, it opened it up to me. I walked in and there was Don Demers' painting. There was a painting by Don of just a fisherman on the beach in the surf. I walked in and there's Bill Davis with this beautiful boat. And I saw a Joe McGurl painting. I couldn't believe he had nailed the color green on that grass so perfectly. It was hot, but it was cold. It was magic. And the guy who ran the gallery at the time, Julian Barnes, walked over to me. He could see I was captivated. He's a very good gallerist, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen any. He really paid attention to people walking in.
Really?
That was
had
amazing.
an incredible eye, though.
Incredible. And he saw me like salivating over this painting. And he said, you know, Joe McGurl has been with us for a while and he just sold out. This is the last painting he has in this gallery. We just had a show of his. And I just couldn't believe people my age or close to it were making a living as painters.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that turned me around. I thought, you know what? That's it. I'm just going to pursue the painting. I love painting. It's what I'm going to do. And like I said, it's about 20 years ago. I was already a painter before that. It's not like I wasn't a painter, but I was doing a lot of studio work. And Joe McGurl was the first one that really just opened me up to go outside and paint more, do more of that. And
so let's talk about that. That's a great transition. Talk to people. Again, we have people listening to this who have never picked up a paintbrush and people who are experienced pros and everything in between. But there's a light that goes off at some point with every artist who starts going outside. And what I think is really fascinating, I've talked to a number of artists who said, you know, I've tried plein air painting. I hate it. I hate the bugs. I hate the wind.
Right.
It's too hard to do it. And they give up. But talk about the benefits. What if you don't give up? How does everything change?
Well, in one thing, the first thing that jumps to my mind is that when I was an illustrator, I was trained as an illustrator and I went to school for it. And it was my job when I was, starting out, and I used photographs. That's how I did it. And I had no problem with it. There wasn't a principle about it. All the great illustrators, Maxfield Parrish, Norman Rockwell, they all used photographs. And it wasn't like I was against photographs. Right. I liked photographs. I liked using them.
Yeah.
But then I started painting outdoors and all of a sudden I could see colors that I couldn't see in the photographs. I saw that there was a lot of red in the greens. I saw that there was a lot of yellow in the sand, but there was also a lot of just surprising color combinations, things that I could never get from photographs. And I also realized that when I stood outside and I was actually painting on a location, it was so much different than a photograph. Photograph captures a split second. But when you're standing there and the clouds are moving and the light is changing and all of a sudden a bird lands on that branch and then it flies away, you see the branch differently. And then you feel the air change as the temperature changes. And a different part of the landscape comes alive. And all of this gets put into the painting in a way that a photograph you just can't do. And the funny thing is, I was just at the Olmsted Plein Air Invitational, and I was painting with a lot of people, and we were having a conversation, and I realized, I can't use photographs anymore. I've actually grown away from it. I don't know
I've had the same problem, and I never thought it would happen.
I never thought it would happen either. But I look at the photograph and it's like what Picasso said. Remember, there's that famous story where somebody walked up to Picasso and he said, all your paintings, they all look like this. Why don't you paint like this? Here's a picture of my wife. And Picasso looked at the photograph and said, she looks very small and gray. It's just, you see the world differently once you've been painting outdoors. So I think there's so much to that.
Yeah. Well, Absolutely. I think there was a moment, I can't articulate when it was, but it was 3 or 4 years ago. I decided I had been painting almost exclusively outdoors or from studies that I would do and translate into studio paintings. And then there was something I decided to do from a photograph, and I struggled I couldn't do it. It was just the weirdest thing. It was finally I thought, well, it's because I don't have a good source. So I know there are people out there, probably yourself included, who can do it, who are so experienced that you can turn a photograph into a painting. And of course, once you've painted outdoors for a long period of time, it kind of changes how you paint and how you look at everything.
It
Um,
does.
what are you do teaching? You just did this video shimmering light. What are the things that you find that most painters struggle with that maybe you could give a tip or two that might help them overcome some struggle?
Well, it gets no respect. It gets none at all. Um, the light source. You
The
got to
light
put the
source.
light source in your painting. And I think that's the thing that most artists just keep forgetting. Um, if you're outside and you've got the sun shining, the sun has to come from the same direction for everything that it's hitting. So be mindful of the shadows being cast and be mindful of what side of this object is getting hit and pay attention to that. That is hands. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, but it is, if more artists did it, they would be amazed at how much their paintings would communicate to people, because I think that's the number one thing that most artists just forget to do. I don't know if they forget it. There is a caveat,
Yeah.
which is, and some of my best friends do this. They are designers. They pull it off though. They can design a painting and it doesn't really matter where the light is coming from because the design is so amazing.
Hmm.
And there are other things that can make a painting work. In painting, when you're an artist, things aren't right and wrong. Things either work or they don't work. And, it's kind of a mind expanding thought, but you got to kind of be open to the possibility that, the rules are there to be broken.
So what is your success rate these days now that you've been painting for 50 years?
Oh, I've been very, very happy with how most of my paintings come out. Um, some of the plein air events, I don't have as high a hit ratio because sometimes I don't. By hit ratio, I mean the number of paintings that I attempt
Yeah.
that actually come out the way I envision them. But that's a little bit like picking up a guitar and strumming versus picking up a guitar and really performing. So sometimes I'm just strumming, sometimes I'm performing, and I think I've given myself that leeway when I paint. Sometimes it's going to be a small idea, and sometimes it's a bigger idea.
Do you ever find yourself influenced by the painters around you?
Oh yeah,
How do you
absolutely.
deal with that?
Well, I let it go. I don't beat myself up over it. For many years, I was very strongly influenced by Chris Van Allsburg. My work sort of started to take on a similar. What you're getting when you're influenced by another artist, you're beginning to see the world the way that artist does,
Yeah.
and so invariably your work is going to start to have a little of that influence. I went from that to being really influenced by Sam Vokey, who's a still life painter and a landscape painter here in Boston. And then Joe McGurl was a strong influence on me. But what's happened is, first of all, you got to let it go. It's the highest praise if you're that connected to another artist. But eventually you'll break out of it.
Yeah.
If you pursue your personal passion. For example, a few years ago, I kind of looked at some of my paintings and they were getting really dark. And I thought, you know what? I'm trying to copy. Copy's not the word. I'm trying to
Emulate.
I'm trying too hard to see through another artist's eyes.
Yeah.
And when I see through my own eyes, the key here should be much higher.
Yeah.
And now my paintings are a very, very high key. And I've had the great compliment of people saying to me, you know, Mark, I can walk into a room and I know which paintings are yours from the other side of the room
Yeah.
because they're very bright. They're, I don't know, sometimes maybe they're a little too bright, but that's okay too.
Well,
You
they're
know?
beautiful. The reason I asked that question is because for years I struggled with the idea, I'd be painting with other painters, which I prefer to do actually. I do like to paint alone, but I also like to paint with other people. It's fun.
Right.
And I would, take a break, get a sandwich or something, and I would peek at what they were doing. And then I'd go, oh, I really like the way he did that water or that tree. And then I would, I'd go back and start changing my painting, of which of course became a disaster. And so the only way I've been able to deal with it is I just don't look. I wait until we're all done painting and then we all look at each other's paintings. But I just don't want those other influences. And sometimes it's not a matter of them doing it better. It's just a matter of them having a different idea or a composition approach. And so,
Well, yeah, and not only that, but you're learning too. We're all learning, and every time you're open to learning, you're going to be susceptible to that. So, I mean, I remember years ago, my father, who was a lawyer, would have a lot of friends would bring over these law books, and interspersed with these boxes would be the New York Review of Books, and in that issue that came out, I guess monthly or whatever, weekly, there would be David Levine. Do you remember David Levine? His very fine illustrations of they were caricatures.
yeah.
I would copy those almost line for line, trying to figure out the magic of his line work. And in fact, when I was digging through a few of my recent old portfolios when I was a little kid, those are the first things that I took really seriously, were my little pen and ink drawings of copying David Levine.
And he'd
So
be honored.
yeah, well, you got to be honest about these things and just be open about it. We get influenced by artists we like, and that's fine. And it's of all the criticisms people could level at me, that's the lowest one. That's going to do me the least personal pain. You really look a lot like Norman Rockwell. Okay, I'll get over it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and I think this kind of goes to that whole idea of training, because you have some artists who train copyists, and then you have other artists who train techniques and the use of your own brain.
yeah,
And there's a big difference, because I won't mention names. I don't want to hurt anybody, but I remember a particular artist that had such a magical approach to the way that he was painting, and everybody was copying that approach by going to his workshops and so on. And ultimately it hurt his career
yeah,
because there were a lot of knockoffs. And so I think one of the things that I thought was magical in your video, for instance, is you were talking about how, you know, I'm teaching you the way I do things. I'm teaching you techniques, but you've got to go out and find your own voice.
right. And that's one of the reasons I love doing the plein air circuit, as they call it, the circuit.
Yeah.
I'm happy to. What I love is that it pushes me to come up with new ideas. And I think ideas are really what hold paintings together.
Yeah.
It's all well and good to learn a technique and to lean on a certain thing that you like to paint, but coming up with an idea, that's where the excitement is. When I was in San Angelo, Texas, for the recent paint out last October, I just had this idea,
Right.
and it wouldn't have come to me anywhere else in the world. I was just out at this ranch, and there was this cactus on the ground, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to paint a painting using the cactus to get the texture of the cactus into my painting. And I mean, that never would have happened if I was not there and not on that trip. And I
Right.
loved how that painting came out.
Yeah.
It was really exciting, and ideas like that. I may never paint it with a cactus again, but my point is, you'll find your way if you keep looking for, following your heart and looking for the things that are true to you.
Yeah. In other words, don't force it. It'll come to you.
Yeah, it'll
Yeah.
come. Don't worry.
Well,
Don't sweat. Don't
this
sweat
is
it out.
always the big debate, and it's fun to sit around with other artists and have these kind of debates. But the idea of, you could, in some ways, you can make a better living when you follow the advice of the gallerist who says, those little red barns, I love more of those little red barns. And it's like, I'm never painting another little red barn again. I just took on a big commission, and after that commission, I said, I'm never doing another commission because it was such a miserable experience, in a lot of ways. But I think the key to all of this is really, you got to paint what you love. When I started this out, I didn't really believe that as much as I believe it now, because it's like, I do have a philosophy, and that is, if my option is painting toilets or painting more little red barns, I mean, not painting toilets, cleaning toilets. If the option is cleaning toilets or painting red barns to make a little bit of a living until I can get on my feet and paint what I love, I'm okay with that. But ultimately, if you're not painting what you love, it's going to come across in your work, and it's you want to be who you are, and I think you've done a great job of that.
Well, thanks. Thank you.
Well, Mark, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on the podcast today. You're such a good conversationalist. We could probably go for another hour, but I got to get to the art marketing minute, and we have some other business to take care of. But thank you so much for being here today, and I want to acknowledge you. You're an inspiration. I think you're a marketing genius. I mean, who else paints in a tuxedo?
Well,
And
maybe I'll bring my tuxedo to the Plein Air convention, and I'll paint with you there.
yeah, so when people come to the convention, the guy in the tuxedo, they'll know who to look for. I think that's really fun.
It's a lot of fun.
And I really enjoyed getting to know you. And of course, we spent a lot of time together when you were here shooting the video and getting some one-on-one time, which was really valuable. So I'm looking forward to seeing you at the convention, seeing people in person. I want to tell everybody that Mark's got a solo show coming up at the Marblehead Art Association, and his contact information is pretty easy. It's Mark. Let's see, what is it for Facebook? You tell us. You know it. I don't.
Facebook, it's Mark Shasha, but I'm going to be doing less of Facebooking, so you'll see me at Instagram all the time.
Yep.
At Mark Shasha Arts.
Okay. All right. And your website is
markshasha.com.
Terrific. Mark, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. I look forward to seeing you again, Eric.
Yeah, we're looking forward to actually being with real people in person again. That'll be nice.
Can't wait.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that was a fabulous exchange with Mark Shasha, and I really could converse with him for hours. He's so articulate and very good. What do you say we get to the Art Marketing Minute now?
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
If you have questions, you can always send them to me. You can send them to artmarketing.com questions or eric@artmarketing.com. You can actually go to artmarketing.com questions and click on it and record a video if you want to do that. Normally, my producer, Amadine, is helping out with the questions today, but she has a cold and doesn't want to be on camera with a cold, which I don't blame you for. So let me read the question. The first question is from Lisa Mistyuk in California. She says, I read the books you recommend, and I'm reading your book on selling art now. That book, by the way, is called Make More Money Selling Your Art. Anyway, it is so helpful. Thank you for that, Lisa. She says, I'm trying to get away from commissions and do more painting sales. And I'm just afraid my genre work that inspires commissions won't sell. I have a million ideas for different series to paint. Should I keep trying with genre and people paintings, or transition to something like trees that might be easier to sell? I'm in the land of zero confidence with my work right now. I can't tell you what to paint, and I can't tell you, I can go into a gallery in here in Austin, Texas, and I can say what's selling, and they'll tell me, and I can go into that same gallery 6 months from now and they'll answer it with a different answer. And it really shouldn't be about what's selling. It should be, as we have talked about in the past, and that is what's in your heart. Paint what you love, paint what you want to do. Now, you don't know if it will sell until you try. And you might not even know when you try, because sometimes it takes time, right? So when you first launch a career, now it sounds like you have a career as a commission artist, and that's it probably took some time to build that up, to build up clientele, to get the word out. The same thing is going to be true for building up your paintings of various genres or landscapes or otherwise, people. And so you're not going to necessarily know right away. You're going to have to get the work out there. If it doesn't sell, the good news is you have commissions to fall back on, right? So what I would recommend is don't go cold turkey on me here. Don't just say, all right, I'm not doing commissions anymore. You tell yourself, all right, I have a plan. I am going to transition. I'm going to continue to accept commission work, but I am going to work towards selling more of what I want to paint. And then when I get to the point where I have replaced my income, then if you decide you don't want to do commissions anymore, then don't do commissions. I think you want to be careful about that. But do ultimately what you love, and you will find a way. It's not quite like Field of Dreams, where if you paint it, they will come. But they will come once you learn the basic principles of marketing, which are in that book, which you just mentioned. You have, I, I don't think, I honestly don't believe that there are very many people out there in the world who are artists who the world comes to them and beats a path to their door and things happen magically. It's like the story of Lana Turner, the actress from the 1940s or 30s, who was sitting in a bar, not in a bar, in a soda shop, and a producer came in and discovered her. The real story probably is the producer came in and hit on her or something like that. But anyway, things like that just don't typically fall in our laps. We have to make sure that we're helping things fall in our laps. You want to help yourself along, and that's where learning marketing is really, really critical, which I teach in my book. I have my blog, artmarketing.com. I teach at Art Marketing 3 mornings at the Plein Air Convention. But you want to be careful about, you said something that I want to remind you of, is you said, I have, I'm afraid my genre work that inspires commissions won't sell. And that's a story, right? You have a story that you've implanted in your head for some reason. And we tell ourselves stories all the time, and we get ourselves in trouble because we will avoid something because we've told ourselves a story that something is true. And it might be true, but it might not be true, or it might be a little true because you've seen a little evidence. I was in a meeting earlier today, and I caught myself telling a story to myself about why something wasn't possible. Well, I changed, I put the brakes on, I changed, I said, let's do it anyway. Let's try it. Let's see what happens. Because stories get in your way. So be careful of stories. Regarding your confidence, Lisa, you are not alone. We all have confidence issues. I remember the first time I put my work into an art gallery, I was really nervous about it, and I thought, well, the gallerist doesn't really want it for some reason. I'm telling myself these stories in my head, and I remember taking the work and dropping it off at this gallery in Santa Fe, and I was really super nervous. And I just was making excuses, and it's just kind of what we go through, right? But the confidence will come, and confidence comes from taking action, right? I was watching a psychiatrist on YouTube the other day, and he said something that I thought was very profound. He said, people are reluctant to start something because they don't want to feel incompetent. They don't like that feeling of being out of control. But when you're learning something new, you are always incompetent until you're not, right? Until you have learned how to not be incompetent. We all go through that. He said, but you will remain incompetent for the rest of your life if you don't start. You have to start. So, the same thing with whatever it is you want to do. Your confidence comes from taking action and feeling a little bit in control by taking action. But then the success will build your confidence. You'll have the success. You just have to stick with it and you will get it. Right. And, success again doesn't fall in your lap. You got to do things like promotion and advertising and writing books and doing whatever you have to do, doing art shows. You just got to take action. But if you don't take action, then you won't get anywhere. Okay, so next is a question from Sherry Denton Maxwell in North Carolina. So it says, I've been an artist for more than most of my 57 years. I've been doing very little plein air. I'm inexperienced and I need to paint outside, but I'm having an issue with being shy or nervous when folks come up and want to watch or ask questions. I feel like my work isn't good enough yet for them to see. All right. So, do others feel like this at the beginning? And how do I overcome this and then break that ice? I usually go out, snap photos, and then go back in the studio and paint them. That's called hiding out, Sherry. It's called hiding out. You've been hiding out. So, listen, again, this is not unusual. This is something I am less self-conscious today than I normally have been in the past. But I'll tell you a story. So my wife and I landed in Paris, and she went to the hotel room to get sleep because of jet lag. And I'm like, I'm going painting. So, and I was super tired, but I wanted to stay up till like 10 or 11 that night. So I go to bed at a proper time. And so I take my backpack and I'm walking. I walk over to the corner of the bridge where Notre Dame Cathedral is, and I'm going to paint Notre Dame Cathedral. This is before it burned. And I'm standing there and I'm doing a painting. And there's a couple of things. First off, I'm tired. I'm really struggling to keep my eyes open. I haven't painted in probably a few weeks. And so I'm rusty. And on top of that, I just did a really, really, really awful painting. It just wasn't very good. But I'm in the middle of doing this painting, and these teenagers come up and they start laughing. And I turn around and I look at them, and of course they don't speak English. And this one kid does speak English. And he comes up to me. He says, "Sir, you really should not be a painter. You are not very good at it." And I was mortified, right? So I could have decided at that moment that he was right and that I could quit. I could have made an excuse, which I did, which was, well, come back in a couple hours when it's finished and see how you feel about it then. And he probably still would have felt the same way. But I think the idea is, don't let anybody else pull your strings. Um, you're going to do bad paintings. We all do. I mean, some of the pros do bad paintings, and some of the things you do are going to come out great. You just got to tell yourself that you have the right to interpret what you're seeing. And just because somebody else doesn't resonate with it doesn't mean it's not good. It's what's coming out of your brain through your nervous system, through your arm and onto the canvas and through your eyes. And so just understand that you're your own unique self. If you don't want to deal with that, one of the tricks I've used in the past is I take some white Apple earbuds and with a string on it, right? Cord on it, and I stick it in my pocket as if I've got an iPad in there. I can hear what's going on, but it looks like I'm listening, so people are less apt to interrupt. I happen to like it when people interrupt. I love to talk to people. I love to interact, and sometimes I still will make an excuse like, hey, it's not done yet, give me a break. And usually people are nice and they don't say anything nasty, but once in a while it happens. Just what's the worst that can happen, right? Is your life in danger? No, probably not. Is somebody going to insult you? Probably not, but maybe on a rare occasion. And so what if they do? You don't know them. You don't care about them. They don't know you. Just give it up. Let it go. My dad used to say this, let it go in one ear and out the other, right? Just don't let it stick, right? The people who get in trouble are the ones who let it stick. So you don't have to accept anything anybody says. The only way to get experience is to get experience. Part of plein air painting is painting outdoors and having other people walk up to you and make comments and ask questions, and just accept it, embrace it as part of the struggle that we all go through as painters, and you will be much better off for it. Anyway, that's today's Marketing Minute.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
Looking forward to seeing you guys at the Plein Air Convention. If you live close, just drive into Santa Fe, close to Colorado and Arizona and Texas and other places. But, a lot of you are coming from a long way away, and it's a great opportunity to learn. We've got about 60 incredible instructors. We have 4 stages. We have an expo hall. And for those of you who are not able to make it, we've decided this year only, we're going to do, because some people are still kind of freaking out about COVID and stuff. So this year only, we're going to offer the main stage on a live virtual, so you can attend that. And that's got about 45 hours, including some incredible instructors and art marketing boot camp and all the openings and paint wars and the Plein Air Salon awards and major speakers, etc. I mean, it's huge. Most people spend most of their time on the main stage, so you're getting the majority. What you're not getting is the watercolor stage or the pastel stage or the demo stage or the expo hall, and you're not getting the benefit of going out painting with us all, but you're getting a great opportunity. And I dropped the price to about half so that you would be able to attend online. Now, don't cancel to attend online. Canceling and being there in person is going to be a whole lot better. Anyway, that's Plein Air Convention is coming up. Also, New Zealand, I got 23 seats left last I checked, and just go to paintingnewzealand.com. It's a trip of a lifetime. I've been 3 times now, and it's beyond amazing. This scenery is beyond spectacular. And then, of course, this spring in mid-June, don't forget about Paint the Adirondacks. It is a retreat. We spend a lot of time together a week. We go out painting 3 times a day to some spectacular spots. And we have a lot of fun. There's about 100 people typically, and we're almost there. Got a few seats left. So you should join us. We would love it if you did. Just go to paintadirondacks.com. Also, I do a blog called Sunday Coffee. I do it every Sunday morning, kind of a personal thing. It is just an opportunity to share some things I've learned. I originally started writing it to leave some hopefully imparted wisdom to my kids. They don't listen, but anyway, maybe someday they will. And it's called Sunday Coffee, and you can find it at coffeewitheric.com. Also, I'm on the air daily on Facebook. It's called Art School Live. We have hundreds of artists doing demonstrations, and we have all of that on YouTube where you can find it. Just go to YouTube and search Streamline Art Video. I'm there 12 noon Eastern every single weekday, and live most of the time, recorded some of the time. And you can, of course, subscribe on YouTube. And I wish you would, because I'm trying to get my numbers to 100,000 on that. I'm just about, last I checked, 86, 87,000. And if you subscribe, that'll help with that. I don't know. No reason to do it other than it's kind of something fun to talk about. Anyway, please also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. That would be really helpful. I'm Eric Rhoads, the publisher and founder of Plein Air Magazine. Thank you for your time today. I'm honored that you would take your time to attend. It's a big world out there, and it needs to be painted. You need to go do that. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
This has been the Plein Air Podcast with Plein Air Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.